So number one, it says write the standard form. What is standard form? Anybody?
Isn't it just whole numbers?
Whole numbers, no fractions, no decimals, but what does it actually look like? What's like on our notes? What was our standard form?
Y equals M.
Not y equals mx plus b. Ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are integers. All right? That's all you have to do to remember about a, b, and c. They're just numbers, but you don't want decimals or fractions. You do not want decimals or fractions. If you forgot that, you need to write that down, right? That's why it's capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C, to help you remember that you do not want decimals or fractions. I might as well tell you this. On any multiple choice test, the test generator will not leave the first number negative. It'll multiply everything by -1 and make that positive. Okay, so just in case you end up with a negative 2x, multiply everything by -1 so it'll become a positive 2x. Anyway, what is standard form ideal for? Like if it's in this form, what's nice? What could you really do easily? So let's say I had this standard form equation, 3x minus 6y equals 12. It's really easy to find the x and the y intercepts. Okay, if it's in standard form, it's really easy to find the x and the y intercepts. Because how do you find the x-intercept? You simply set y equal to 0. You guys remember that? So it's as easy as this. If I say find the x-intercept, set y equal to 0. Look at this. I'm covering up the y. That way you could imagine that it says 3x equals 12. So if you solve 3x equals 12, what would the x-intercept be? 4. X would equal 4. The line would cross the x-axis at 4. If you wanted to find the y-intercept, what do? You set x equal to 0. So you'd have the equation negative 6y equals 12. And if you wanted to find the y-intercept, where would it cross? Negative 2. So when it's in standard form, it is great when they ask you to find the x and y intercepts. Okay. How about slope-intercept form? What's that?
Y2 minus
Y equals mx plus b. So remember, the word form is just the organization of the equation. The word form is the way it looks. So standard form, it looks like this. Has x's and y's on this side of the equal sign. A, b, and c are numbers that are not decimals, not fractions. Slope-intercept form has y by itself. It doesn't have x and y on the left side, just y by itself. Oh, which, by the way, that's also function form, y by itself. But when it's in slope-intercept form, you could clearly see the slope and the y-intercept. And what is slope-intercept form ideal for? Like, what's really easy to do when something's in slope-intercept form? Let's say I had y equals 2/3 x, let's say minus 1. What's really easy to do? Graph, right? It's really easy to graph. I mean, yeah, you could clearly see your slope, the rise over run. You could clearly see your y-intercept, the -1. But like if they told you to graph, you don't even have to do any math. That crosses the y-axis at -1. And you would rise 1, 2, run 1, 2, 3. You would connect your dots, and that would be the graph of your line. Really easy to sketch a graph if it's in slope-intercept form. So the two forms that we should be masters at already are standard form and slope-intercept form. We're going to learn a third and final form today. It's called point-slope form. So everybody jot that down. Point-slope form. Write it down. You need to have this memorized. If you have different colors, it's awesome to use different colors right here. Why do we call this point-slope form? Well, form is the way it's organized. And if it's organized like this, then you could clearly see a point. What is a point? It's an x and y value. It's a coordinate. And where do you see the point? You see it right here, x1 and y1. That is a point. And the slope, you could clearly see it right here. Okay? So as you guys are jotting this form down that you need to memorize, I want you guys to recognize something just to help you memorize this form. It kind of reminds me of slope-intercept form. What was slope-intercept form? Y equals mx plus b, right? X plus b. So this equation almost looks like this. I mean, for me it does almost. Because y equals, right here we have the y's equal. The only difference is they have y minus y1. instead of just y. So it's equals m equals m. And over here it's equals mx, and right here it's also equals mx, but it's x's, right? So it almost looks like slope-intercept form. At least for me it does, and it helps me remember point-slope form. But there is no b value on point-slope form, okay? Slope-intercept, why do they call it slope-intercept? Because you could see the slope, you could see the y-intercept. Why do they call this point-slope? Because you could see a coordinate right here, x1, y1, and you could see the slope right there, if it's in that form. Anyhow, let me tell you how great point-slope form is. You guys remember last week we were doing this worksheet right here? And we were writing equations. And so like number 4, if they told us write an equation and they gave you a point and they gave you a slope, what did we have to do last week right here on this one? You need to write an equation. You want to write it in slope-intercept form. You need 2 things to write it in slope-intercept form. What are they? Wow, nobody remembers?
You need
M and a B. Okay? So what did we have to do last week? Well, they gave us the M, it's right here, 4. We needed to find the B, and how did we do that? Well, they gave us an X, a Y, and they gave us an M, and we plugged it all into Y equals MX plus B. The Y value is 9. The M value is 4 times the X value, which happens to be 1 in this case, and the plus B is what we would solve for. Angel. So I do the math. 4 times 1 is 4 equals 9 plus B. I'm trying to solve for B, so I need to get rid of that plus 4. What do I do? Minus 4. Thank you. Cancels. Minus 4 to the other side. What's my B value? 5. So last week they gave us the M. And they gave us a point also, and we had to plug it all into Y equals MX plus B. We had to solve for B, and then we could take the M that was given to us and the B value that we found to plug it into Y equals MX plus B again, and we'd have Y equals 4X plus 5. Everybody should know how to do this. Everybody should be comfortable with this. Yay? Yay. Now, if they told you to write an equation up until today, that's what you had to do. But now, let's say I told you write an equation, and I give you that same exact point. Let me write down the point. It was 1 comma 9. And the same exact slope, the slope was 4. And they tell you write an equation. If you know point-slope form, if you know point-slope form, you could plug it into point-slope form. Here it is. Y minus Y1, I'm going to leave a blank spot, equals M. I'm going to leave a blank spot, parentheses, X minus X1, close parenthesis, I'm going to leave a blank spot. So where do I get my X1, Y1 values from? From the point. So what am I going to put right here? 9. Thank you. So we put a 9 right there. What am I going to put right here in place of the M? 4, right? And what am I going to put in here in the parentheses with the X? 1. The X value of 1 right in there. That's right. And if they told you write an equation and they don't specifically tell you what form, you're done. This is it right here, guys. That's your point-slope form equation. Now, let's say that they said to write it specifically in slope-intercept form. Okay, now remember, form is just the way it's organized. And an equation, it's kind of like a piece of clay. You could just mold it and shape it however you want. So if you wrote the equation, they gave you the point, they gave you the slope, you plugged it into point-slope form, you have the equation here. If they wanted you to rewrite it in slope-intercept form, all you'd have to do is make it look like Y equals MX plus B if they told you to do slope-intercept form. So what do we know about Y equals MX plus B? Well, for sure there's no parentheses. So if you didn't want parentheses, what would you do? Distribute, right? Somebody said it, distribute the 4. 4 times X, 4X. 4 times negative 1, negative 4. And you still have the equal sign, the Y, the minus 9. We only need to do one more thing to get it in slope-intercept form. What's that one thing? Get rid of that negative 9. How do I get rid of the negative 9? Plus 9. Cancels. Plus 9 over here. What's my slope-intercept form equation? Y equals 4X plus 5. You see how easy that was? they gave me a point and a slope. I plugged in my point right here, plugged in my slope right there, and then I changed the way it looked to get the y by itself. Notice that it's the same exact. Okay guys, sorry, having technical difficulties here, but we need to know that point slope form, it's just the same as we did before, but I think even easier than using slope intercept. You could plug in your point and your slope and then change it to slope intercept form. So up until now, as of today, we have these three forms that are very important to know. The three forms are slope intercept, and by the way, I'll give you these notes in a little while. Slope intercept, we already know y by itself, y equals mx plus b. We already know m is a slope, rise over run. We already know the b value is the y-intercept. We also know standard form, capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C, where A, B, and C are not decimals, not fractions. And it's really easy to find the x and the y-intercept when it's in standard form. And point slope form is what we learned just now. If you have a point, you plug in your x right here of that point and your y right here of that point. And if you have a slope, put in your slope right there and it'll be in point slope form. And it's easy, just like before, m is still the slope, it's still rise over run. What else? The x1, y1 is a coordinate, a point. So I think that's a good enough video for an intro on point slope form. We need to practice now with our homework. So I do want to go over this example right here. This is actually from our homework, so you need to know this anyway. I could give you some information, like let's say your line passes through the point 1, 3 and has a slope negative 3/4. And I tell you, write an equation, any equation. What would the easiest equation to write it in be? In standard form, point slope form, or slope intercept form? If you're saying slope intercept, then I should be giving you the slope and a y-intercept. Do I give you a slope and a y-intercept? No. What do I give you? A point and a slope. So what form is the best to use? Point slope. Okay? So let's write down point slope. And this is the way I want you to start writing down point slope form always. It's y minus y1, but leave a blank spot, equals m, but don't put m, leave a blank spot, parentheses, x minus x1, but leave a blank spot. Everybody do that right there. And then if you have a different colored pen, so if you do have a different colored pen, you could use that. Like I want to use blue for m, like I always do, and that's negative 3/4. And the negative 3/4, actually, I'm sorry. Let's, before even plugging in values, let's put the y1 right here, the m right here, and the x1 over here. So I would use different colored pens if you have them. If not, it's all good. But when you plug it in, write it with blank spots. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot times parenthesis x minus blank spot. And now you could look up at your coordinate and label it x1, y1, and of course label your m negative 3/4. And let's plug in our values. So instead of y1, what do I put in?
3.
Instead of m, what do I put in?
3/4.
Negative 3/4. And instead of x, what do I put in? 1. So that is our point slope form equation. And if they asked for point slope form, you would be finished. But let's say they told you write it in all three forms, right? So this would be your point slope. I'll put a PS right next to it. Now let's say they wanted us to change it to slope intercept. Slope intercept does not have parentheses. So what would I do to get rid of those parentheses? Multiply the negative 3/4 to the inside of the parentheses. Now let's say you don't like fractions, right? And you don't want to be dealing with multiplying fractions. You don't have to deal with it. You could get rid of it by multiplying everything by the denominator 4, right? Or maybe instead of slope intercept, maybe you want to do standard form first. It's up to you, right? So ultimately, you want to get so good at this where you could change it to any of the three forms. So you could multiply everything by 4 to get rid of the fraction 3/4. So if you go times 4, times 4, times 4, and you don't have to multiply the inside of the parentheses by 4. because whatever you do to this outside term, it's like doing it to the inside terms because of distributive property. So if you did multiply everything by 4, you'd end up with 4y minus 12 equals, the 4's cancel, and you'd end up with a negative 3 parenthesis x minus 1. So you could get rid of the fractions, and then you could get rid of the parentheses by distributing negative 3 times x, that would be negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 1, that would be a positive 3. You'd bring down the equal sign, bring down the 4y, the minus 12. And now it's a question of, do you want to write this in slope-intercept form, y by itself, or do you want to write it in standard form where you get the x's and the y's to one side? So if you say I want slope-intercept, then you would, or standard form, you would get the x's to the left side by doing plus 3x, plus 3x. And you would also get rid of that minus 12 by doing the opposite. I might as well do 2 steps in one right here. Plus 12 here and plus 12 over here. And then you would have it in standard form, which would be 3x plus 4y equals 15. So that would be your standard form equation. So again, we took the point slope form equation and we changed it to standard form. And we could take that standard form equation and change it to slope-intercept, right? How would we do that? We'd have to get y by itself. So let me move things around here. If you wanted y by itself, you would subtract 3x. You would have 4y equaling negative 3x plus 15. Finally, you would divide everything by 4. And you'd have y equals negative 3/4 x plus 15 divided by 4. And that would be your standard, or your slope-intercept form equation. So you could possibly take any equation and change the way it looks to any other form that you'd like to change it to. Let's take a look at the homework. The homework for today, we're going to be practicing all 3 forms. They give you some information, they give you some equations, and you need to manipulate those equations and change them to the form they ask you to. So if we look at the first section, it's really easy to do. They want you to change or to write an equation in point-slope form when they give you a point and a slope. So everybody should know that point-slope form is, so there's your point-slope form. I always recommend writing it with blank spots. Then you plug in your x1, y1. So it's going to say y minus 3 equals m. M is negative 3/4 times x minus x1. X1's 1. And you're done. That's how easy that whole first section is. They give you a point, they give you a slope, they want you to plug it into point-slope form. The second section of our homework, it says write each equation in standard form. Okay, well we need to first know what standard form is. Standard form is capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C, and you do not want decimals or fractions. So they give you an equation. So we have some with decimals and fractions. Which one do you guys want to do, 11 or 14? 11. Okay, so if you don't want fractions, what could you do to get rid of that fraction? Multiply everything by 4. So that times 4, the 2 times 4, the 3/4 times 4. You're going to end up with a new equation that reads 4y plus 8 equals, the 4's cancel. You end up with a negative 3 parenthesis x plus 1. You do not have to multiply the x or the 1 inside the parentheses by 4 because it's kind of like protected by the parentheses. Anyway, we want to change it to standard form. You don't want parentheses in standard form, so what would you do? Multiply everything by negative 3. Negative 3 times x, negative 3x. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Let's rewrite everything. We have a 4y plus 8, an equal sign. And now for standard form, let's get the x's and the y's to the left side. So you go plus 3x, plus 3x. You can't do it, you would rewrite it. But we might as well get rid of the 8 as well on this same step here. Let's subtract 8 and subtract 8. So our standard form equation will be positive 3x plus 4y equaling negative 11. So what did we do? We took this original point slope form equation. By the way, the slope is negative 3/4 and the point is -1, -2, because you have to think opposite of what you see right here for the x1, y1. And we took that point slope form equation and we manipulated it. We changed it to standard form. So we're going to have to do that on the middle section. And on the last section, we're going to have to change it into slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is what?
Y equals mx.
There you go. So again, they give you a point slope form equation, and you're going to have to change it to slope-intercept form. So number 20, for example, that's point slope form. The slope is -3. The point is -1/4, +1/4. But that's kind of irrelevant right now. We're not even graphing. But we need to change this point slope form equation to slope-intercept form. Now we know that y equals mx plus b does not have parentheses. So we don't want these parentheses. So we might as well distribute the -3 to both of them. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times +1/4. You guys know what that is? In case you forgot, it's really easy to multiply a number times a fraction. Put that number over 1, and then multiply the top number with the top. So that'd be -3 times 1, that's -3, over 1 times 4, that is 4. So when you distribute the -3, you end up with -3x, and you end up with -3/4. Might as well rewrite the whole thing. We do have a y minus 1/4 on this side and the equal sign right there. Now, we almost have it in slope-intercept form. All I have to do is get y by itself. I could, if I wanted to, multiply everything by 4 to get rid of the fractions. But because we have a denominator of 4, we could simply deal with the fraction because it's a common denominator 4 on both. So I could add 1/4 and add 1/4. And right here I'd end up with my y all by itself equals the slope. And now all I need is the y-intercept, the b value. What is -3/4 plus 1/4? When you have a common denominator, you could actually subtract -3 and the plus 1. You'd end up with -2/4. And -2/4 is really what? -1/2. So you have y equaling -3x minus 1/2. And that would be your slope-intercept form equation. And that's what we're doing on this third section of the homework. Guys, I don't know if you're realizing this, but all the skills that you've been using, you're going to start putting them together. And it's only going to get more challenging. If you guys are not practicing, if you're not doing the homework, it's only going to get harder. So please make sure you practice.